Hello and welcome again to another episode of Vintage Pens for the Modern User. Now, if this is your first time joining, or perhaps you've watched a few videos, you know that I am an advocate for vintage fountain pens as being everyday writers. That's what these pens were made for. I'm very passionate about them. Not only do I collect them and restore them, but I use my vintage pens on a regular basis, and you can too. Today we're going to explore the Wahl fountain pen metal pens series, which were made from 1921 until 1929. We're going to look closely at what makes these pens unique, why Wahl developed them, and really the elegance and beauty that you can find in these metal pens. They were machine turned, and they are certainly works of art to behold, but they also have some incredible nibs and make excellent, easy, everyday writers. So let's dive in and take a closer look.
Now you can see in front of you a nice tray of Wahl fountain pens. In the 1920s, the Wahl Pen Company and the Eversharp Pencil Company were both under the same company, but they used the names to distinguish between the Wahl pens and the Eversharp pencils. And you can see both here, they made these matching machine-turned patterns, which were quite elegant. And there were probably close to 20 different patterns created over the 8 years that Wahl made these metal pens. Now, the selling feature that Wahl advertised when they first began production of these was that a metal walled fountain pen. These are not hard rubber fountain pens with metal overlays. They are all metal construction with the exception of the hard rubber section and feed. And as a result, that allowed a pen of this size, of any of these different sizes, to have a larger ink sac installed inside the barrel of the pen than a comparable hard rubber pen of the same size with a metal overlay, because the hard rubber would have, of course, restricted the barrel diameter. So they're really quite durable, and they do make good users. These pens I have in front here are in pretty good condition. You can find some, because they are metal, they do kind of sometimes get dings or dents in them. But again, pens with those kind of marks, blemishes perhaps, actually make good users. I always say when you find a pen that's worn, it was probably somebody's favorite daily writing fountain pen. And so you may actually have a gem of a writing instrument on your hands when you encounter something like that. So let's take a closer look at some of the different sizes. You can see quite a variety here in front of me. I do not have in front of me the very largest size that was made, which was a number 6 size fountain pen, only made in the Grecian pattern or the Greek key pattern. But I do have the other sizes that are fairly common to find. So on the very far left here, these two tiny ring top pens were the smallest size that Wahl made. They are quite diminutive. They had a number 0 nib actually, which was installed in them. You can see from my hand, perhaps a little bit small, but when these pens are posted, they do generally have a pretty good length about them. And so even though this is tiny, in some hands, this would work really well. This would have been a very elegant piece of jewelry that somebody could have put on a chain. Probably a woman could wear on a chain around her neck. Would have been a very elegant little piece of decoration that then she could use to write a note with if she wanted to. Could have also been used by a gentleman on a pocket watch chain in a vest pocket, although the size probably was more geared towards the feminine hand. Here are some larger ring tops. Again, the same thing in terms of how it would have been worn and used. These had a number 2 nib installed in them. Again, posting them becomes a bit more comfortable. In fact, I could probably use this pen to write with if I desired to do so. These patterns are incredibly elegant. Some of them are less common to find. This pattern is known as the Wedgwood pattern. You could find them in generally 3 different types of gold: yellow gold, green gold, and rose gold. And you could also find them in sterling filled or in solid sterling. And you could even find solid gold fountain pens that were hand engraved, which are lovely to behold. So we move from this shorter size ring top to a longer size ring top here. which was available. And then we see here that same size, only now with a clip. So this is the smaller size clipped pen that you could find. Same diameter, same nib. All three of these would all use a number 2 nib, and in fact, all 4 of these, I'll take out here the longer clipped pen, would use the same nib. This is known as a number 2, full length, number 2 on the shorter size, and of course my ring tops that I mentioned. You did find matching pen and pencil sets. Wahl may have well been the first person to advertise these sets, which was another selling feature, that you could have a pen and pencil that matched. Certainly other manufacturers before this made pen and pencils that matched each other, but marketing as a set was really something that Wahl took on when they created this metal pen. You will also find early lever fillers like this one, which were actually a spring type lever filling mechanism, similar to what Schaefer's used, that snapped back when you worked the lever. And then Wahl developed their own lever system, which actually came up, and there were some little feet on either side inside that worked the bar in the pen up and down. And so these did not spring back, but the user would simply push them back into place. Really easy to use. And again, these hold a very large capacity of ink when the sacks are installed in them. Move over here, you'll notice the length of these pens is not the same. This pen here on my right is longer than the pen on my left, but the pen on my left is actually a wider diameter. Maybe a little bit difficult to distinguish here, but then this would have a number 4 nib in it. These nibs, Wahl nibs, are quite flexible oftentimes and a delight to use. Many people drift towards the Waterman when they look for flex because they hear Waterman 52, it's well known, or the Waterman 12, and as a result, they neglect to look some of the other makers of the era who made equally flexible and delightful nibs. Wahl, I think, made some of the best nibs of the era, in my humble opinion there. Different patterns here. This pattern was known as the dart pattern. I did pick up this one earlier. This is probably the most common pattern someone would encounter, called Grecian, often now called just Greek key. This pattern is probably the one that's out there the most in all the models and all the sizes. It's the only pattern in the largest size 6 pen, which is hard to find and a bit rare, commands a little bit of a premium. Here we have a silver filled pen. You can see some wearing on the ends here. The wave pattern is what is in this, and this is actually the number 5 size. So it's a bit longer than this number 4, but it's a bit more girth to it. So this would be a very comfortable pen. This one has the incorrect nib. This is actually a later Skyline nib here, but it would normally come with the number 5 nib. So delightful writing instruments. The pencils were very reliable. They were driven at the back. When you use one of these propelling type pencils, it did not repel, it only propelled. So you would turn and the lead would come out. When you reversed it, the mechanism would reverse, but then you would push the lead back in with your finger. Sometimes you find these, as this one has, where the same machine turned pattern that's on the barrel of the pencil is actually inside on that mechanism when you pull it out. So quite elegant, quite lovely sets, actually. If you are someone that also likes to write with a pencil, the Wahl Eversharp combination pen and pencil sets are wonderful to have. So let's do as we always do and write with one of these, because I tell you what a great writing nib Wahl made. It would be a shame to say it and not show it. So very easy mechanisms, like I said. I'm going to use the earlier mechanism pen here, which again is more of a spring-loaded type of a lever, but both lever filling mechanisms function about the same. One just has a spring that helps it come back down, and the other you just push back down on your own. Waterman's blue ink. I am a proponent of using a good tried and true vintage ink in one of these pens because it's just reliable. Back when these pens were used, people didn't change inks the way we do today. They just used one ink for an extended period of time. When they ran out, they filled it up right away because they wrote with them regularly, used them regularly. So they pretty much used a consistent ink in them regularly as well. So as you saw, that's pretty quick and easy to fill. One working of the lever. This pen, again, this is the full size, what I would consider the full size pen, the number 4. It's pretty comfortable, pretty elegant to behold, and certainly has a lovely nib. So here we go. I know this nib is probably flexible, so I'm going to demonstrate some of that first. The feeds were good. They kept up well. So there's really a lot to be said for how one of these pens, it's very responsive when you write with it. You can get some nice hairline sometimes and some really nice broad strokes. I'm a lefty overwriter, so I don't generally get the most out of my vintage flex pens, but overwriting, you know, when the nib does the work, the pen does the work, it writes under its own weight. There's really no concern with too much of how you hold your pen, as long as you're understanding that basic principle. So, Wahl is spelled W-A-H-L, fountain pen. These were known as the metal pens. They were machine-turned patterns from 1921 until 1929. And you can see even in my lefty overwriting, I'm still getting some shading just because of how responsive this nib is. It's a number 4 nib, and it just has great ink flow. I can't say enough about these pens. They're some of my favorites. And I would encourage you to take a close look at any early Wahl if you're looking for flex, because my goodness, how can you go wrong? If you know how to use flex, you'll certainly have a more elegant style of writing than I do. But even if you don't, you know, you can do basic block letters. And if your downstrokes are thick and your side strokes are not, you know, you can get some variation there. That almost looks a little like a horror film the way I wrote with it, but put some red ink in it, have some fun with it. Wahl Metal pens, great vintage pens, great daily writers. That's what they were made for, and the company really knew what they were doing in terms of a basic mechanism, easy to fill, and a highly tuned nib that's a delight to use. So check them out and consider adding one of these to your collection. They're very beautiful pens, and they are not terribly expensive, so you can have something that is almost a work of art, a piece of jewelry, at a very affordable price, and not be afraid to use it every day. Happy writing.